We gotta have it.
Greetings, saints and friends.
Hey, y'all.
What's up, y'all? I hope y'all have had a wonderful week since the retreat. We are coming to you live from the Fuller Estates, and we just want to share a bit of the lesson that we did not complete last Saturday on communication styles and barriers to communications and the types of communicators that we are. And hopefully this will be a blessing to you. There is a scripture that has slowly become my favorite scripture, and it's James 1:19. And I'm reading from the NIV. This is my scripture on communication. James 1:19 reads, "My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry." And I just feel like I had to put that out there in the atmosphere because everything that we do and discuss is Christ-centered. And I always want to share the word of God with you. And I want you to kind of meditate on that scripture. Just take that for what it is. And I don't know what's going on over here.
I'm meditating on the word.
Okay. But anyway, we're going to get into the lesson. Tasha wants to, just a quick overview. We already brought you the greeting.
So Freddie has a tendency to think out loud. So we have an agenda, and he's going to recite the agenda.
Praise report.
So we're going to go into just kind of like since this week, like what kind of feedback we've received from you guys. Lots of praise reports. So I'm excited about that. We've already had our Eve call. Some of the things that the ladies were saying is that there's been lots of encouragement coming from the husbands. Everybody's being calm and listening, almost to the point where it's a little scary, but it is welcome and it is appreciated. So I'm excited about that. You know, I have some of the ladies, texting, talking about 1 degree at a time. Just, they just made one step. So just about us all being intentional and trying to focus on spending more quality time together so that we can create opportunities for communication. So we just want to, thank God for that, because God is good. And this is the purpose of the retreat, for us to see lasting results that come over time that help us become more effective communicators as far as our marriages are concerned. So
I hope that the fellas, this video is being made before our 3:00 call today, and I'm sure you're going to share some things in our circle. But I know that we all took away pointers. Hopefully your wives took away some great takeaways, and the exchanges between the husbands and wives are going much better this week. If there was a honeymoon period this week, I ask that you pray that it continues. I mean, it doesn't have to be just this week. In fact, we all have communication challenges. And in fact, yesterday,
good segue, dear,
the Fullers had a moment on the way to Home Depot. And I think Tasha really wants to share that, and I will chime in when appropriate. But go ahead, Tasha.
That's an excellent segue to the next thing on the agenda, Freddie. Great.
Yes.
Yeah, so we also have communication challenges, and it's just really about how you deal with it. We told you guys before, we usually have an opportunity to talk in the morning when we go work out. And so yesterday was a little different. Freddie had some stuff to do early, but we had agreed that, we're getting the house painted. So I wanted to make sure Freddie was included on that process. And, when we, even before we can get in the car, I just felt like Freddie was distracted. And I kept asking him a question. He kept saying no to me, but he was actually doing the exact opposite. So it was a real trigger for me, as far as, you say one thing is coming out of your mouth, but you're doing something totally different. And I felt like you don't think that I see, and I'm aware of the fact that something different is happening. And so it was just, I felt like I wasn't being made the priority when we had set aside this time to be together, even though it was doing a specific task. So high on emotions, the conversation did not go well. I was not a very good listener. I really didn't want to hear what he had to say after I felt like he was pretty much lying to me, bold-faced in my face. So I was just like, I'm not listening. And so I didn't really give him an opportunity to speak. And, it just didn't go well. So we pretty much didn't end up speaking, most of the day, because I was just like, no conversation that we're going to have is going to go well because I'm angry. And I would just rather not have a conversation. And so that was our challenge. But, this morning we had a conversation. Everybody's calm. We were able to communicate what our intentions were. We were able to apologize. Did I apologize?
No.
I'm sorry for yelling. I thought I did.
Yelling, cutting me off, talking over me.
I did all
I was really, just taken aback by the whole thing. But I've gotten better this morning. I just want to say that there were parts of yesterday where I should have explained myself better. I also should have been more mindful of our time together in the morning because I had some things to do when I first got up. I should have been more mindful that, hey, we haven't had that chance to really debrief with each other, kind of engage at the beginning of the day and share what was on our hearts and minds. And I was on another call, and it didn't go well. And I should have explained what my intent was. I think if I would have taken the time to explain what my intent was, it would have just gone better. But we both had some missteps. We acknowledged that. And, we brought it back around this morning. And I think we're going to move forward in a better way today, especially before we would get on this video and talk to you guys about communication. We're going to get into the lesson, talk through some things, share some pointers, and then that's going to be it. But just a quick recap. Last time, you might recall, we started talking about active communication, and we never really got off of page 1. I just want to mention a couple of things, and then we'll just jump right in. A few things that you should incorporate in active communication. Are you staying focused on topic? Listening uses verbal and nonverbal cues. Eye contact, nodding your head, yes. Things like that. Not interrupting, focusing on what is being said, responding only to what is being discussed to indicate that you're making a real effort to understand your counterpart, and it makes them feel trusted, or they have trust in you because they feel like you're listening. Focus on what's being said, not what you have to say next. That's so key. So many times we're formulating our response while somebody's talking to us. Just listen. Have patience. I think this is one of the biggest ones. We are so eager to say what we have to say. So please be patient. We all mean well, but when you talk to your spouse with the solution and plan figured out, it creates an undertone of I am smarter than you, or your opinion doesn't matter. So let's not try to come up with the entire solution. Let's work together on our solution. Active communication and listening builds trust. Timing and delivery is imperative. Sometimes it can be how you say it or when you say it. And we talked about the how, the what, the when, and all of that. Silence is important to understand too. What does silence mean? Am I listening? I am thinking, I am listening. Am I paying attention? Am I not paying attention? Am I mad or not going to be responding? Sometimes silence can be good, sometimes it can be bad, but let's try to understand what silence means. And by putting your focus on understanding your partner, you will build rapport and trust. Trust has come up 3 times, by the way. Passive listener, receiver doesn't provide feedback or ask questions or may not understand. So some of us listen passively. Basically, it goes in one ear and comes out the other. And sometimes that's because of the way it's being delivered to us. So we have to think about it on both sides. Why is that? And don't forget, there's verbal communication, nonverbal, there's written, as well as visual. So those are all types of communication. And communication can be impacted by several things. Your cultural background, the way you grew up, your gender, your temperament, and sometimes a difficult time understanding and respecting others' feelings, needs, and habits. So those were areas that we touched on. But you remember, we got into role playing, we got into a lot of dialogue, and we really didn't get to jump in to a lot of different things. Today, we're going to focus on 3 levels of active listening: internal, focused, and global. And then we're going to jump into some of the habits of active listening. and then we're going to talk about what types of communicators we are. So hopefully we can get through this pretty quickly. We don't have an audience to engage with us. There's nobody chiming in. I have to
Bless you.
Jesus.
You gonna bless yourself.
Thank you. And it was building up, but
you got through.
I'm gonna hand it over to Tasha while I go to the bathroom.
Okay, wait a minute. I was gonna make a joke, and then it was like, then I forgot the joke, and then I was like, okay, remember the joke, and I was like, well, maybe you should have did the active communication, and we would have got through the whole page because you done went through that in less than 2 minutes.
Well, I always like to get an overview just in case we don't get to everything.
Yeah, I mean, because you don't got interruptions. You know, I told Freddie you better be careful the way he step out of that camera. Okay, so while Freddie steps away, we're going to talk about the 3 levels of active listening. We talked about the 4 levels of communication, like stuff on a superficial level, just like sharing of information, sometimes sharing thoughts and ideas, and then getting down to level 4, sharing emotions. And but part of getting to the point where we can get to a level 4, we have to talk a little bit about the 3 levels of active listening. And Freddie's doing some type of TikTok. Get low, get low, get low before you get back in the camera. So, so one of the things, active listening, it unleashes creative energy and productive collaboration for a meaningful relationship. The feeling of not being heard can stop people from sharing. And so one of the things that Freddie talked about is like some of the stuff that we do when we're supposed to be listening, but we can often get distracted. So the first level of, and there's 3 levels. There's internal listening. You're only listening to speak. Focused listening, listen to understand, and global listening, which is listen to learn. So there's 3 levels, and the first level is the level of internal listening. Internal listening is when we listen to speak instantly and unconsciously. On this level, we hear, and how we respond is largely influenced by our own thoughts and emotions, right? So when Freddie was talking to me yesterday in our communication challenge, when he started talking about what his intentions were, I was not trying to hear about his intentions because I was pissed. And I didn't ask him what his intentions were. And when I asked him the question about the call, he only said no. He did not express his intentions. And so what that did for me was that just ignited something in me. And I was really not giving him an opportunity to speak, and I was not actively listening. The other thing is we pay attention to what's going on inside of us and less about what's going on outside, what our spouse is actually saying. So I wasn't really trying to hear what he was actually saying because my emotions were heightened, and I was only paying attention to how I felt, not what was being communicated to me. So that was certainly a level 1 communication. It's more like a 2-year-old talking to a 2-year-old. They're not interested in what you have to say. They just want to figure out what works best for them. And usually what happens is our minds are wandering from what our spouse is actually saying to our own voice, the voice that we have in our head when they start talking. I know what the person is going to say, and I already have an answer. That used to be a big issue for us. Like I would be mid-sentence and Freddie would start talking, or he would only respond to hello and then miss everything else that was being said. And it was a huge communication barrier because he wasn't taking the time to listen to me. So it's important for you to hear all of what your spouse has to say. And even if you have to write it down, to make sure that you get the points that your spouse is saying until you become a more mature, active listener, then maybe that's what you need to do. So make sure that you don't already have this response played out in your mind, because it really is a true indicator that you're not paying attention. Did you have something to say about that?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Other thoughts easily distract us, like, okay, my phone just chimed, the kids are knocking at the door as we record this video, the TV is on, we're thinking about other things that we have to do, what was said the last time we talked. And one of the things that we said was being an active listener is focusing on what your spouse is saying and not trying to bring up stuff from the last conversation, because that should have been resolved, and we can't be throwing stuff back in each other's face. One of the things that Freddie says to me often is, but that's not what we're talking about. So that is kind of like a little key indicator. Like he said, when I say, and that's all that I know, it's something for me to say, okay, stop what you're doing and just stay focused on what you're talking about now. So we need to focus on eliminating the distractions when we're having a conversation. And lastly, for internal listening, we only hear part of what is being said, and we miss critical information and respond at the first chance in our opinions or judgments without addressing what is being said. So that is key, like, because that ain't nothing but an argument, because you're not listening, you're only saying what you think or how you feel about something. And sometimes that's not even what the conversation is about. Sometimes the conversation is just about listening, and that's when I went off on my tangent with my sister. Sometimes it's just about listening and not what you want to say, or for you to pass judgment, or for you to give your opinion. Sometimes people just need a listening ear. So when we're at a level 1 of internal communication, it's hard for us to not do these things because we are so immature in our listening. Do you have any comments?
No, that's good. That's good.
Okay.
I'm mindful of, getting all the topics in. So
Okay.
I want to keep flowing like you're doing well, baby.
Okay, thank you.
Doing well.
Okay, I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
All right. The next level, once we move up, that's what it is. It's a progression. We want to move from just listen to speak to listen to understand, which is focused listening. Focused listening is you're channeling your energy to listen to what the other person is saying. So we're focused on the words, whether they're telling you, okay, I had a great day, but this, that, or the other happened, and you're really paying attention so that you know what the person is communicating. We stop our personal filters from attaching additional meanings to the words in the form of judgment. So a personal filter is like stuff your spouse says one thing, but you interpret it as something else. And I think that was part of our communication barrier yesterday, is that I didn't attach a personal filter, but Freddie, like Brandon says, am I supposed to read her mind? So his answer was no, and that's all he communicated, but he didn't communicate his no with his intention, right? So part of the issue is because I've learned not to read into what he says, I'm only taking what he says as a part of the conversation. Why? I can't read his mind. Yeah. So that is a thing where we can't attach things to what people say, because it will cause us to misinterpret their message.
But at the same time, we can't hold back what we're thinking when we respond. I think things would have gone a lot better if I had explained my no and what I intended behind that. We didn't get into the details, but with you all about what happened, but I should have taken the time to explain what I was thinking at the time. And I think it would have just helped in our conversation. I think it would have been a lot smoother.
Yeah.
If I would have shared that.
Yeah, because it would have had a totally different result. Because if he would have expressed his intentions, I could have told him what I was feeling. But every time I asked him the question, he just kept saying no. So therefore, when the behavior continued and I asked the question again, he said no. So by the time we got to the Home Depot, I was furious. She
was very upset.
No, I was furious.
She was really upset.
And because I was angry, the conversation did not go well.
It didn't go well.
At all.
I was remaining calm.
He did. He did a great job.
I was like, man, she is upset. I was like, Lord, help me. Lord, help me. I'm trying to be calm, Lord. Because if I blow up, then it's going to really just be a big blow up.
Absolutely.
And she cut me off. She talking over me. But you know what? I'm okay with that. Because she's upset. And I have to maintain what I said I was going to do. And I'm not going to get upset.
Right.
And that's what I've been practicing so much. It's like, I'm not going to take it there.
Right.
Whatever comes. But I'm going to remain calm. Because I know that it's going to help in the long run.
It absolutely helped. And, even though I was angry with Freddie, I told him why I was angry, but I did not berate or belittle him, right? I didn't call him any names. I didn't call him no names, did
No, not that time. No, she doesn't call me
I don't call you
She doesn't
names.
call
I
me
mean, I
names.
don't, so I didn't
We
call
don't
it.
punch below the belt like that.
Yeah.
Talk about rules of engagement. I mean, we don't take low blows like that. I mean,
Yeah,
it
we
doesn't
can't.
do anything but hurt. And that stuff stays.
Yeah.
The things you say,
Yes.
it stays.
Right.
It
So
stays, y'all.
people, it absolutely stays. Like, I mean, that's the whole point. That was the trigger from the conversation. It's like you're saying one thing and you're doing another. And then you're trying to convince me that what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing you say and seeing you do is not the case. So you got to be mindful that in order for people to trust you in a conversation and there to need to be free flowing conversation and for you to have resolve, you got to be honest with yourself and honest with your spouse. Anything else? We're gonna just keep.
No, we're gonna keep it flowing.
So when we're focused listening, we try to take those filters off. Our thoughts may wander, but we are conscious about an effort to block them out and bring them back to the focus of the conversation. Especially if you feel like your spouse is long-winded. So if it takes 15,000 hours for your spouse to get to a point.
You talking about them?
I'm talking about them. You always have to stay focused. Oh, no, babe, you barely say a word in our conversations.
Not much at all.
Okay, so you have to make sure that you stay focused. It's being a focused listener, listening to understand is about you. It's about you being intentional about staying focused on your spouse and what is actually being said, so that you can understand what they're saying and be able to communicate and respond effectively. Because once you understand, you can give an appropriate, sensitive response to what they're saying. And then also the third level is now we're taking a step up. So we've gone from internal communication, which is like baby listening, to number 2, which is focus listening. Which is like, okay, we trying to get there. So that's a more mature level of communication to global listening. And global listening is listen to learn. Okay, what can I take away from this, right? I want to learn something about my spouse. I want to learn something for our next interaction. We listen to learn. So global listening is like we listen to learn. We listen beyond the words, what is being said and what isn't said. So what is being said in the conversation, it also ties into the other type of communication, which is the nonverbal. If I say to Freddie, no, I'm fine. No, I said I was fine. Okay.
You are fine, baby.
I know. Thank you, Daddy. That was good. See that? Look at that. Global listening is him understanding that I'm not fine. Like, regardless of what I say, my body language, my attitude, I'm not okay. And, being a global listener is trying to figure out why I'm not okay, right? Even if I say that I'm okay, the body language will tell you that I'm not okay. My attitude, my tone will tell you that I'm not okay. Becoming a more conscious of the environment, the body language, the energy. Listen to the nonverbal communications is just like what we said. Listen to the nonverbal. Is she really okay? Is she just saying I'm okay to get away from the conversation or to shut me out? I know Freddie talked about in the recap about the silence. Silence can be good when you're listening, but silence is not good when you've had this whole conversation and there's no response from your spouse, right? Like you've poured out your heart or you said how you feel about something and there should be a response, and then nobody says anything, or they say, okay, and then they walk away. That's not good. Why? Because they're on level 1 internal communication, or they have just shut you out. They've put the wall up. Nothing that you say says matter, positive or negative. So a lot of times when there's a lot of negative talk towards your spouse and things that like you constantly hitting below the belt, your spouse cannot even appreciate that compliment that you're making, right? One of the big things for the fellas in the session when we switch is that when I told them that the wives feel unsafe, right? And, the guys immediately jumped to physical abuse, right? They didn't realize that it really wasn't about physical abuse. It was emotional and psychological abuse. When you're constantly being talked down to or berated or called names or ignored by your spouse, you don't feel safe to talk. And that was a theme amongst the Eve session, is that people didn't feel safe and secure to talk. So be mindful. Yes, Freddie.
And I would say it's not just the guys making an unsafe environment. It goes both ways.
Oh, absolutely.
Because a lot of times the wives are trying to understand, why doesn't he want to share, or why does he shut down? Because a lot of times there are things that we say, we feel like it's going to trigger an outcome that we don't want to experience. We've had exchanges in the past, and I said X, Y, and Z, and she just blew up. And so when that happens, because we're not just receiving what someone is saying as opposed to reacting, if we take the time to receive it, listen, not try to react, it can create a safer space for everybody to communicate more effectively. And I think a lot of times guys don't share. It's like, man, I ain't trying to hear all that.
Yeah.
If I say this, she gonna go down this path. I ain't trying to hear that.
Right. And that was a problem with Freddie and I, because he wasn't communicating, because he had already played out the whole conversation in his mind about my response to what he was going to say. And I was like, well, you never even gave me an opportunity to respond. And then when you did talk to me, did it end up like you thought it would in your mind? And it went nothing like he thought it would in his mind. Right?
We just have to remember, if you continue to create a good environment, the communication will grow. And a lot of times we get caught up on what has happened in the past when I communicated something similarly, and you will recall that response, and you let that response play out every time you think about having a similar conversation. So we have to grow from that, and it takes baby steps. As some people say, it takes 1 degree at a time. But we have to grow.
I said that.
Yeah, I know. It's just, I know who said it.
You said some people.
I know some people, like the ladies that picked up on it, and they said during the week too.
Yeah.
So some people, just you and them, some people.
Okay.
Not just you.
Okay.
Just want to be really clear there, clarifying. Anyway, we're getting off task here.
Yes. We start to take note of tone, emotions, reaction, openness to share, or reluctancy to give information. And that's basically what we just talked about. Like, why is your spouse reluctant to give information? Do they feel like you're going to retaliate? Retaliation should not be as a part of your communication strategy. Retaliation I remember you said this. So you really, like, one of the words you'll keep hearing us saying is being mindful about what is being said, how you're responding to how you're responding to what is being said, and then what you actually say in return, to get to that global listening to learn. And then also be aware, and this is kind of like repetitive, of the subtle facial expressions and the body language. Like, one of the things that I heard one of the couples say, when they got home, they had a communication in the car. One spouse thought one thing, they were in agreement about what they were going to do, but how they were going to get there was the miscommunication. One spouse thought, okay, we going right in and taking care of this, and the other spouse was like, okay, let me take care of this, that, or the other, so that when it came time to do what they had agreed upon, there was some tension, because they didn't communicate how we were going to get to A to Z. One person thought we were going to go from the car to this. The other person thought, okay, I'm going to the car, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And so by the time they got back together, there was some stress, but they were able to work it out, and they were able to do what they had agreed upon. So even with that, you have to make sure that you guys are on the same page. Like, just because you agree to do something, you also have to discuss and pay attention to how we're going to get to what we agreed we were going to do. Because y'all can have 2 different game plans, and then you can get upset about the game plan. So just make sure, as a global listener, you're listening to learn. And you also want to do that first level, the second level is listen to understand, and try to get away from listen to speak. So, because that's just all about you. And so, okay, so how do I get to that spot? You're going to go from just collecting raw data, verbal and nonverbal. Like we're going to go through the active listening pipeline to actually processing. Stop and think, y'all. Stop and think. Process with context and interpret and translate. So one of the things that we have learned how to do is when I'm saying something, Freddie will go, okay, this is what I heard, right? Mm-hmm. This is what I heard you say. And based on what I heard you say, this is what I understand it to be. And then if he says something that, if his level of understanding is not what I intended, then it gives me an opportunity to clarify.
Yeah, I try to paraphrase what I just heard. Sometimes I repeat exactly what I heard, but I also want to show that I understood that within the context of what she meant. And like she said, if I don't interpret it right, then she will clarify. But we gain a much better understanding because I take the time now to process what she's saying and then try and articulate in a way, feedback to her that she understands that I understand.
Yeah.
And vice versa.
Yes.
Because it goes both ways. I think one of the challenges is we say things, but the context in which one says it may not be received in the same context. And we have to make sure we're both singing from the same sheet of music. And really just understanding what were your intentions behind that. Because a lot of times if we listen to respond and we don't take the time to really understand where they were coming from, we only interpret it the way we thought it was meant to be, and we don't ever get confirmation that that was the true intent.
Right. And so that leads right to the next step, Freddie, is just to advise or ask follow-up questions. Like yesterday's conversation would be, but because I'm going to say this, if I would have asked a follow-up question the third time or even the second time, like you're saying no, but you're still doing this, so help me to understand what your intentions are, right? That would have been a good follow-up question. But because of my thing about when people are on the phone, you don't try to have a whole conversation with somebody on the phone. I didn't do that because I don't believe in talking to someone when they're talking to someone else.
Or if I would have just said no, but this is what I mean by no, and explained it comprehensively, then she would have probably said, okay, now I feel this way about X, Y, and Z. And we would have came to an agreement a lot quicker.
Yeah.
And probably resolved that.
Yeah, it wouldn't have been an explosion.
It wouldn't have been all the anger in the parking lot at Home Depot. I was feeling berated and just, over talked and just, I'm joking, but, it was like that, but I was like, good night.
Yeah.
But it certainly could have been avoided.
Yeah. So just to recap, there is internal listening when you're not really listening. You only listening to respond. There is focused listening where you're listening to understand. And then there's global listening where you're listening to learn. And then how do you get to the global listening? You want to make sure that you're collecting the information, the nonverbal and the verbal cues. You want to process with context. You make sure there's a level of understanding, interpret and translate what you heard. And then the next step is to either respond or ask more questions to make sure that any points of clarification are taken care of. Any points that you're not clear of that you can get clarification on are important.
So I just want to share a few habits for active listening, some things you can practice daily. Some of them we already talked about. I'll just run down the list so we can go to the next session of the lesson. Control self-discipline. Don't allow yourself to be distracted. Allow the person to finish their thoughts before responding. Avoid interrupting as much as possible. Practice silence and watch how it affects the other person. Slow down and give the other person a chance to express their thoughts. Wait to see if the pause means they are finished. Think before you speak and address what was said. Train your brain to grasp the information and retain it. Keep the discussion about the idea or the issue brought up by the person. It's okay to remind the person of this. We talked about that. Keep the discussion about the idea or the issue brought up by the person. Don't go off on tangents on other topics. Don't make it about you. Listen, receive it, tell them how you feel about it, but don't make it about you.
Can I say something to that point?
Mm-hmm.
We had to really make that a practice. Like when I would bring something to Freddie's attention and I want to discuss something that I feel like is an issue, then oftentimes it would come back to me, well, you do this and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, wait a minute, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about this particular issue. And if you have an issue with me, then you need to bring it up in the time that you choose. But right now we're going to deal with my issue. And I think that's also what Dana and Jamila experienced when they did the reenactment of Christmas, that Freddie made sure that I stayed focused on what was happening in the moment and why he was upset, and not allow me to bring up the 50,000 times that he had done the exact same thing, because that was not the point. The point was I needed to address his concern and stay focused on his concern, because it wasn't about me. It was about what I did that triggered him, but it wasn't about me.
Absolutely. And it was only 49,999 times.
Not 50,000?
Not 50,000.
Okay, all right.
Be aware of personal filters and prejudices and not let them impair your judgment. Establish boundaries and rules of engagement.
That's important.
Establish a collective communication strategy that works for both of you. I think over time, that came organically as far as a strategy. We recognize if one person is really not in the mood to talk, that the other person's going to let it go for now. But, that other person has to bring it back up. When they're not in the mood, they need to bring it back up. So we kind of like recognize when it's the appropriate time to talk. We're not going to throw low blows that don't make any sense, but just hurt you, it hurts your feelings. So those things grow over time. And as you talk more, you develop better strategies. So
yes.
It does require practice. It's like anything else. You have to continuously practice communicating with one another. And as you do that, it gets better.
Going into the next part is intentional communication brings about effective communication. So it's really about not how much we're communicating, but how effectively are we communicating. Like when we sit down to have a conversation, is the intent of having the conversation being met. So, getting past those 1, 2, 3 into 4, sometimes the communication is about just to talk about the schedules. And usually that's what our morning communication is. Okay, what's your plan for the day? What time does your meeting start? What do you have to do today? X, Y, and Z, so that we can be on the same page. And then if necessary, we can go into the deeper levels of communication about our thoughts. Like, okay, what I was thinking about this. What do you think we should do? Or this, that, or the other. Or speaking about our emotions. I felt like X, Y, and Z when, ABC happened. So, when we get there, we have to be intentional about making time to talk to each other. On the Eve call, and hopefully this will happen on the Adam call, is that, we did the exercise that we did last year about what does our day look like, and how intentional are we about spending time with our spouse, right? Because if we're not intentional about spending time with our spouse, then there's really no opportunity for communication. And we get so busy with the surface level 1 and 2 communication that we don't even have time to go into the 3 and 4 communication. So let's just be mindful about how intentional we are about our communication. More than just the exchange of information, we want to understand the emotions and the intent of what is being communicated. And that is intentional and effective communication. Respect has to be the basis of most comes across in the communication. So if you are cutting your spouse out, you're not being respectful, right? If you're getting loud, you are not being respectful. If you are calling your spouse names, you are not being respectful. If you are not giving your full attention to your spouse, like looking at them, engaging, you're not being respectful. If you're on the phone or being distracted, okay, we're not being respectful. So, you just have to be mindful of being intentional about your communication and how effective that's going to be. Because the point of communication is we want to connect, build trust, and feel heard. That was a consistent thing. I don't feel heard. And make the exchange gratifying and empowering to you both. And make us feel appreciated and important to your spouse. Because when you are being respectful, your spouse feels appreciated. And they feel like they serve a level of importance. But when you talk down to your spouse, they're not going to feel important. Do you want to say something?
Nah, just looking at the next point.
Okay.
Hear the person out, no matter if you agree with their viewpoint. That is so critical. Like, you have to learn how to be patient and listen, even when you don't agree. There have been times when I'm furious, I'm fuming on the inside, but I'm like, I'm gonna calm down and I'm gonna listen to everything that's being said, because I know that the conversation is gonna be a lot smoother if I allow her to finish what she's saying. Because when it's my turn to say something, I want the same level of respect. I want to be able to get out everything that I have to share, and I want to communicate that thoroughly in my mind. So I think it's important for both of you to take that time, because you want to be heard and your spouse wants to be heard. So give each other that mutual respect to listen up.
Okay. And so what we're going to talk about next is barriers to communication. Like, what happens when this stuff breaks down? Like, what could be a barrier? And we tapped on it a little bit, but Freddie, why don't you share some of the barriers of communication?
So some of the barriers of communication, and we continue to say the same themes. There's a dissatisfaction or disinterest. Again, your spouse may be talking about something you have no interest in hearing about. You just don't agree with it. And you say things sometimes. I'm like, I take a deep breath and I just listen and I receive that. And there are times when I say things to her that she's not interested in, but on very rare occasions. Number 2 is an inability to listen to others. You are a know-it-all. No one knows it all. You know that you don't know it all, but you choose that path anyway. We have to let the other person share. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I am enlightened. Sometimes she's enlightened by the things that we share. Absolutely. But it's because we took the time to listen that we hear those things. Lack of transparency and trust. I think that comes with time. I think there's a level of trust. Just like people said they feel unsafe. That's because there's a lack of trust. That can be because of the actions that have happened in the past. It can be because of things that have been said in the past in response to something you shared. Mm-hmm. And I think over time, you create an environment over time to be more transparent, because when you feel safe, when you feel like you can trust that this space is safe, then you will be more transparent, because you feel like you can open up now. You feel like there's not going to be a retaliation or an outburst or some negative response. And if we continue to practice the things we're talking about today, the receiver of information is going to be more mindful that, hey, I want to create this safe space. I'm not going to fly off the handle. I'm going to listen to really understand what my spouse is talking about. I'm going to listen to learn from my spouse what they're sharing. Mm-hmm. Communication styles. We all have different communication styles. We're not going to be able to get into the details on that today, but we have to recognize that different people communicate differently. Your wife may not have the same communication style as you do. Your husband may not have the same communication style. And you have to recognize that and take that into consideration as you're communicating. There are physical barriers. There could be you're in different rooms. Go to the same space.
Please.
Or one person's on the bed and the other person's in the closet. Come out the closet. Give the eye contact. Acknowledge that you're listening. You might be on one side of the counter or the other, and this requires you all to be sitting next to each other. Mm-hmm. There could be all kinds of distractions.
Yeah, stop washing dishes. Stop looking at the TV. Stop
looking at your phone.
Yeah,
all of
that.
Stop.
Just stop and give your spouse your
complete attention. It doesn't
attention.
kill you to take a few moments, because typically what happens when you don't take a few moments, it keeps going. And I know me, I don't like it to keep going. I'm like, let's go ahead, especially when it's a topic you ain't really trying to hear.
Right.
Like, the best thing to do is comply, because it goes so much smoother. It's when you do all the extra that the thing seems to just drag out. Exactly. Mm-hmm. Emotions can be a barrier. Getting upset and demonstrating that and having outbursts as a result of being emotional, mm-hmm. It doesn't go well. Yesterday, I was like, this joker's not trying to hear what I gotta say. I'm getting cut off. But I had to also remember to keep my emotions in check.
Yes.
Because it was going to escalate to a place that it didn't need to go.
And honestly, I was like, there was a point in the conversation where I was like, he is getting ready to go off. And so for even me recognizing that, but just emotions on the other side is that if your spouse feels emotionally unsafe, you're never really going to have a productive conversation until you address those things.
Absolutely.
You have to address those things.
Absolutely. And they're just being different genders. As we all know, guys, typically, I always say it's the person, it's not the gender. But, there's some trends that run through females. There's some trends that run through guys. I would just say be mindful of that. But there's not a catch-all. All guys don't do X, all women don't do X, and some things are vice versa. Mm-hmm. But just be mindful of that within the context of conversation. There's interpersonal barriers, closeness, manipulative interactions when you're intending to do something manipulative, winning and losing. We had a conversation about that on the call. There are no winners and losers. We got to work this thing out together because we are a team. We're team marriage. And we're on the same team. So we have to work towards working things out. And some things are ritual, repetitive routines devoid of real substance. That's kind of like that level 1 conversation we talked about, the good mornings, the hellos, the goodbyes, just the routine conversations. Those can be barriers to digging a little deeper. Sometimes we just got to ask a few more questions about what we're talking about. Don't just allow it to stay at the surface level. Dig down to levels 3 and the levels 4 so that you can make a meaningful dialogue between the two of you. So those are some of the barriers that you should keep in mind as you're going through this daily walk of interacting with one another and communicating with one another. And that's what we're going to bring to you today. Hopefully that is enough. I know we have these documents. I think we're going to share these after we have a conversation on Tuesday night. And then you will have the information handy. You can take your own notes. But at the same time, we don't want you to be distracted by the document. We want you to focus on the conversation, and we'll share that after the lesson on Tuesday night. So we want to say this has been real. This is our first recording. We've never done this before.
I think it went extremely well.
It went pretty good, Tosh.
And like Freddie said, the next video is going to be on communication styles. So we are going to be mindful of your time. We hope you guys have a blessed week. We pray that everybody has listened to this video so that we can have a meaningful discussion. And we love you.
We love you guys. Have a great day.
Baby. Give me some sugar. Mm-hmm.